Hello and welcome to another episode of Drive With Me. Today I actually wanted to do what effectively was an unintentional part two, because yesterday I recorded a video that was fundamentally about my developing thoughts on the video game industry and how it ties into the rest of the American economy and what we can kind of glean from it. And I realized that I talk quite a bit about my thoughts and my plans in regards to gaming and how things are shifting over time, and just what my thoughts are moving forward. Yet I actually didn't really talk about how it wound into or impacted the rest of the wider economy. So I thought I would do that today. And to kind of summarize yesterday's video for those that have missed it, the general idea was that PlayStation or Sony announcing they're no longer going to be producing discs for their PlayStation consoles as of January of 2028. While it is as an older school gamer that collects physical games, it is frustrating. It is, in my view, both somewhat inevitable and not the end of the world. It is very frustrating, and I do not plan on picking up a PlayStation 6 at least early on in the life. Maybe I will if it's discounted and it has a large number of first party games that I am particularly interested in, but it's not going to be my main gaming device moving forward. And for the last almost 3 full console generations, it has been. Or at least heavy use. I would say that between the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, I actually probably use the 360 more, but I did love many of the first party games in the PlayStation 3 and ended up playing more of it as the generation went on, funnily enough. And then with the PlayStation 4 and now 5, it's been my primary gaming unit. And while I have Xboxes and I've always had Nintendo consoles, my first one was an original Nintendo Entertainment System, and I also have a gaming laptop, I have spent the vast majority of my time playing games on my PS5 over the last number of years. And I don't think that's going to be the same moving forward, due to the fact that I can't really definitively own my products that I'm buying. And if I'm not going to have any kind of competition with the Sony store, which means that they can functionally set their prices and use variable pricing and so on to their heart's content without any real pushback if you own that particular unit, I'm just going to move over to PC. I literally already have one, and I think a lot of us are going to be moving there. It's not that this is going to kill PlayStation, but I do think it's going to hurt the enthusiasm of many of the core fans that have been around since the early days. And that's very much where I stand. So that pretty much summarizes that within a few minutes. That while I may even eventually pick up a PlayStation 6 or possibly an Xbox Helix or whatever they call it, I think my main gaming devices are going to increasingly move towards just playing on PC and maybe having a Nintendo Switch or whatever they have at a given moment as backup for Nintendo titles. And again, Nintendo's kind of already moved and been relegated to that spot for me. My early childhood was a lot of playing on Nintendo consoles up through the Nintendo 64 and even into the early GameCube days. I primarily played on Nintendo consoles, and that switched as I grew up and moved over to Xbox and PlayStation, and never really had put the same amount of time into Nintendo games. It was just their first party titles, and I'd play Mario and Zelda and Smash Brothers and Mario Kart, etc. And that was about it. It's pretty much all the Nintendo consoles have been for me since then. And I think PlayStation's about to do the same. I guess, to be fair, Microsoft functionally did the same thing, wherein I was really excited about the original Xbox and the 360, and going into the Xbox One generation, I had some high hopes, and it just did not pan out, and we've never hit those heights of the Xbox 360 days again. And that's okay, but on the other hand, it means I spend a lot less time on my Xbox than I used to. So over time, it's just kind of become, it's transferred from one into another, where it was Nintendo, and then kind of a transition period into me playing more primarily on Xbox consoles, and then that transitioned into playing primarily on PlayStation consoles, and now I think I'm transitioning to playing primarily on PC. And if I play on the others, it is mostly for the exclusive content on those systems, and or whatever benefit they may have to it, which is increasingly looking less and less appealing and compelling as I get older and as the value proposition just frankly drops. So that's kind of where we're at. And where I believe this ties into the wider American economy, it particularly relates to AI. So while, for example, I know the Xbox division of Microsoft cannot directly control the cost of memory, NAND, and like for RAM and for solid state drives and so on, they can't control that. But Microsoft as a company does have a strong AI division that they're putting a lot of money into. And in fact, they're even hiring for roles throughout the Xbox division specifically for integrating AI workflows into game development. So AI is very much a thing that's being pushed by many of the largest publishers and companies in this industry, and by extension, a lot of the rest of the Western world's industry in general. It's being pushed into, and the service sector as a whole, right? Because that's functionally what AI is trying to do, is more or less industrialize creative industries and mentally heavy knowledge-based industries. That's what it's trying to do. It's trying to take knowledge that has been collected through a variety of sources and mostly put on the internet or in databases, and trying to use algorithms to put that together and synthesize it into ways that allow people to access knowledge and be able to use it in a way we've not been able to prior. That's really all it is. It's not actually generating anything. It sure as hell isn't learning on its own. None of that, even the term, and I have other videos on this, the term artificial intelligence really is a misnomer, and it's just frankly inaccurate. It is an advanced search engine programmer that with really complex algorithms that can be specialized to do certain specific tasks, like generating video that looks roughly akin to something that could be real, or generating text that looks like, I don't know, a sixth grader wrote it or whatever, right? It's not really high quality, but it's good enough right now. And now they're trying to shoehorn it into almost everything, because for CEOs, that means in theory, instant productivity gains and lack of need for so much labor cost. And so it's a CEO or a major investor's wet dream, which is exactly why it's become such a big part of the American economy. And that represents where a lot of this stuff is moving. So we've already been having automation of many industries. Like if you walk into a car production, automotive manufacturing facility in the 2020s compared to even back in like the 1990s or 1980s when I was a kid, you'll see a lot more robotics, a lot more automated systems, and a lot more controlled by computers and less done by people. And it's been a trend. It isn't a switch that was flipped. It's been a movement gradually from human powered labor to more robotics and automation powered labor. And then much of the rest of American industry that we've lost over the last half century or so went to places like China or the Philippines or Mexico or Vietnam or what have you, places with lower labor rates and less labor protections, most notably. And so we have shifted from an economy that was very heavily agrarian just like a little over 100 years ago. We were still primarily, most people still worked in agriculture, right? And then that switched over to most people worked in some form of industry. And now it's switched over again to most people work in some type of service sector. And with each movement towards industrializing it and doing more with fewer people, we've shifted the entire nature of the American economy, right? And so now the vast majority of people not only don't work in agriculture, most people haven't worked in agriculture for several generations, and they don't even know, what their great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, what they would have even done to maintain a garden, right? Which would have been a survival necessity just like 100, 150 years ago, right? So now we're doing it again with industry. We're slowly kind of phasing a lot of that out as best as they can. Fewer and fewer people involved in everything from coal mining to actual like vehicle production to making computer chips and what have you. Just as few people as possible involved. And now with the service sectors and creative sectors, they're trying to do the same thing with AI. It is entirely possible that over time it ends up having a pretty major impact, kind of like with the internet and computer infrastructure has done for the wider economy over the last 30, 40, 50 years. However, we're not there yet with AI. We're just not. But that is the prophecy. That is what these big tech CEOs are selling. And even the Trump administration here in the United States has largely accepted it. And now you have AI CEOs that are showing up to things like the G7 summit, which is a collection of the largest economies in the world, to apparently discuss the importance of AI on the world stage, which really kind of feels dystopian just saying it. So video games and technology really are kind of a representation of a wider change and shift that is happening through much of the United States and the Western world as a whole. So while it may seem really dumb to get so upset about Sony stopping disc production, it feels a lot larger than it otherwise would to me now, just because of how many other things, excuse me, are not really going the way of the American consumer or worker for decades. It really does feel like we're just continuing to step in more of a people don't matter, corporations and profit matters direction, and we've been heading there for a long time. So I don't care if one identifies as Republican or Democrat or Tory or Labor or any other variation of these binary or even multi-party systems that exist throughout the Western world, right? It doesn't matter. Ultimate problem really tends to be that people are having a harder time making ends meet and getting ahead and providing for their families generation over generation, and that's not going to change. So while yes, Sony is just stopping disc production, they're taking away options, they're making ownership more difficult, they're squelching competition again, and I'm not okay with that, and I'm increasingly intolerant of it, to be entirely honest. That's what's funny, is that as a fairly tolerant, open person, the one thing that I really can't abide is naked greed and intolerance. That's pretty much it, right? So that's kind of where we stand, I think, as a nation, as a world. This is the struggle of our age, if you will, to use kind of like Lord of the Rings terms here. The struggle of our era and of our generations that are alive today, I think, is really going to be trying to get corporate power around the world under control, and probably failing at it for the foreseeable future. And eventually we'll see a tipping point where enough people are angry and enough people are hurt and enough corporations have really wrung themselves dry and just depleted their consumer base and upset enough people and wrung out enough profits that the juice is no longer worth the squeeze, and much of the system collapses or changes because it has to. And I do truly believe we'll get there. As a hobbyist student of history, one thing that I did have seen over and over and over again is truly everything changes, which is not revelatory. However, when organizations or empires or nation states are at their most powerful, that is usually when they're at the most risk of collapse. Funnily enough, it's counterintuitive, and you would think, oh, they've reached the peak, they've reached their apex. Funnily enough, that's when they start making dumb mistakes. That's when they start sealing their own fate that often is not actually fully realized for centuries, sometimes later. And one of the examples you'll hear often is Rome, right? The United States is like Rome, or it's speed running the collapse of the Roman Empire. We're not, strictly speaking, but we're making many of the same dumb mistakes, like devaluing our currency very rapidly and allowing wealth to consolidate among the elite at a very rapid pace, and increasingly using that political inequality to result in greater and greater economic inequality, which is then kind of becomes a vicious cycle where all of those reinforce each other and eventually leads to collapse of some kind. Doesn't mean inherently apocalyptic. It doesn't mean the United States won't exist anymore. Rome existed in different forms for well over 2,000 years, right? Especially if you include Eastern Rome and what we now call the Byzantine Empire, that was hosted through Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. So now we're getting into history. But anyway, if you include that, you're talking Rome lasted from roughly 1700 BC all the way to 1453-ish AD. So, I mean, you're talking, what, an almost 3,000 year civilizational history, roughly, give or take. So, I mean, that's an example. It's not, I'm not trying to doom and gloom this and say that, oh, the United States is going to just, it's going to go the way of the dodo, like, or that the West is going to cease to exist. I don't think that's the case at all. It would take something really catastrophic to do that. But I do think we are actively walking towards the cliff of our own, losing our own status and losing our own prosperity. And we're doing it now. So that's kind of where it's at and what I'm concerned about, where we're going in the future and why. So it's not that we need socialism or communism. I don't care what you call it. We need to put systems in place that keep the nation as a whole thriving. It's just like the gardening that I've been getting into lately, right? That if any one particular plant starts doing really well, when I, like, say, sow them out, right? And I'm planting seeds, the ones that do the best tend to choke out the ones that don't. And after a while, you're left with fewer and fewer plants. And if one doesn't kind of become dominant, they will fight. And that competition may be good for elements like the soil and so on, but it will fight until eventually only one is left. And that's just the way of things. It's the way humans work too, whether we like to admit it or not. We're cooperative only when we feel we need to be, or when we want to be, but we do it with as much, if we're doing it because we want to, we're trying to do it at arm's length to protect ourselves, right? Because humans are fundamentally, generally pretty self-interested. And that is to say that we're generally pretty selfish. And that's all of us. And when you add in wealth in there and the people that are willing to push for the acclamation or accrual of wealth, above all else, those are the type of people that are most susceptible to that corruption anyway, more often than not. So it's something we need to look out for, and it's something we're even seeing now with hobby industries that aren't even objectively that important to the overall economy, like video games. So you made it this far. Thanks for watching. Kind of went on a little bit of a side tangent, but I hope I brought it back in for everybody that, like, this greed is all encompassing. It's impacting all aspects of our economy right now, and we can do better. And the more quickly we wake up and get the kind of angry that we need to actually impact change, the better everyone will be in the long term. So I hope that this helps, was interesting. Again, thanks if you stuck around this long. Feel free to like the video if you do. And otherwise, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening. Y'all have a good one and talk soon.